Story number 1.
I'll never forget the day my life changed forever. You know, when you were your father's last hope to run his businesses and continue what he had started? I didn't know that my small misstep would cost me everything, including what my father had worked hard for. If someone was once in my situation, what would you have done? How would you have dealt with the greedy and selfish husband? Let me take you over to what happened before the whole ordeal. So I, F30, met this fine gentleman while we were in university. We were studying at University of Johannesburg, UJ, in South Africa. I was doing my 3rd year in business psychology, which was my last year to obtain a bachelor degree. My aim was to get a master's degree on the same course, so I was going to continue studying till I got my qualification. Well, my goal was to start a business coaching company, helping business owners develop their soft skills, such as communication, flexibility, leadership, problem-solving, and time management. My husband, M34, was doing his 4th year of diploma in business law. We met at campus. I was in a cafeteria sitting alone going through my books because I had a test coming up, so I needed to focus more in order to pass, which meant I didn't need any distraction. I was revising some questions when Brian came and sat down on the table I was at. He was a clean and handsome guy. His spectacles suited him very well. Though he looked like a snob, he was still handsome. He asked if I needed any help because I looked stressed. And yes, I was stressed. The test was stressing me out, but I had to do what I had to do right. I ignored him for obvious reasons. 1. Being I didn't want to entertain university boys, I had to focus on what I went to university for. 2. I didn't want any destruction. His handsome snobbish self was a destruction enough, but I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. He kept trying to converse with me until I asked him to go, and I didn't need his help, which he didn't do. I was relieved when it was time for my next class, so I left him there without saying anything. He kept coming whenever he was on lunch break or didn't have any class, trying to talk to me and asking me out on an ice cream date. I was charmed by his enthusiasm, but I wouldn't show him. I wanted him to sweat a little. You can't expect a girl who gets everything at home to just jump and say, okay, let's go out for ice cream, right? As much as I got everything at home, my father was a businessman, and my mother was a head of department, CHOD, at Spark Randburg High School. I was the only child they had. I admired my parents' relationship. As much as my father was not perfect, but he was an awesome parent. My mom, on the other hand, sigh, was a very strict parent. She always wanted perfection, but nonetheless, she was a great mom. The love they shared was so amazing to a point that I looked at them as my role model. They shared everything, did everything together, but most importantly, they loved each other very much. That's what I wanted when I got married. Okay, enough about my parents, let's go back to my husband. So after the whole month rejecting him and him not giving up, I eventually agreed and went out with him. We started getting along from there. As snobbish as he looked, but he was funny and had the brains. We started off as friends. We would go out a lot, trying out new restaurants. He was from a big township called Davidon. As time went by, we got closer each and every time we spent time together. He lived in one of the student apartments in Auckland Park, which was not far from our campus. I loved spending time with him. I would miss him when he was not around, or if I didn't talk to him for a day. I think I fell in love with it. Or didn't I? He became my best friend. We shared almost everything. During December holidays, he was supposed to go home in Davidton, but he didn't, since he took holiday jobs to cover his studies and send money home. He came from a financially stretched home, which made it his responsibility to take care of his family and his study fees. He had 3 younger siblings who depended on him and a mother who was an alcoholic. As much as his background was not good compared to where I was coming from, I fell in love with him. I used to go to his workplace to bring him lunch. He took a job as a bartender at one of the busiest nightclubs during weekends. He used to do night shifts because it would be busy at night, plus it was a festive season. And worked as a waiter during the weekdays when he didn't have classes. I loved the way he was dedicated and tried everything for his family and himself. I remember it was the 16th of December, which was a public holiday. He invited me to his home to meet his siblings and mother. I admired the relationship he had with his siblings. He had that fatherly love and warmth. His mother was a very kind and welcoming woman, but her alcoholic behavior was a problem. I asked him what had happened to their father, and I saw sadness and sorrow in his eyes, so I didn't ask anything further. All I wanted to do was to love him and his family despite their background. My mother once asked if I had a boyfriend because I was going out a lot, even on holidays. Well, I used to spend holidays with my family or visit my father's hometown called Greytown in KwaZulu-Natal. I was not ready to get lectures from my mother, so I denied having a boyfriend and told her that I was going out with friends. Brian was the only person I enjoyed spending time the most with. My childhood friends would complain, saying that I have changed and they felt like I had ditched them for a dude I met at campus. Well, my friends were snobs and discriminative. I told them about my relationship with Brian, but they didn't approve of it because he came from a background with a low standard of living. I hate people who judge others by their background while they don't even know their own background. They just know their parents and their big homes. My father taught me to embrace where I was coming and never judge or look down on other people despite where they were coming from. So hearing my friends talk low of my boyfriend as if he was not trying to better his life changed our friendship, which made me spend more time with Brian than with them. My father always reminded me the importance of family, knowing your roots and respect, which was why he made it his mission to take me to his hometown, to know about his roots, which are mine also. As strict as my mother was, I was glad she was not like my friends' mothers. I liked them, but they were too big for their own shoes. They forgot the importance of humanity and respect for others just because they were married to people who had money. I won't say they were rich, but they were affording. My mother was also from Greytown. Her and my father were high school sweethearts. Cute, right? The people I called friends used to say Brian was just with me. Because of my parents' money and he didn't love me, he was just using me to gain something. After they had said that, I completely ended the friendship because it was fake. So the only person who became my friend was my boyfriend. Brian and I dated for 2 years. He had finished with his studies and graduated. I was so proud of him. I introduced him to my parents a year after we had started dating. My father welcomed him, but my mother was a little suspicious of him, though she tried by all means to hide it. My mother gave me a lecture on how I should not trust Johannesburg boys. When we start being intimate, we should use protection, because she didn't want unplanned pregnancies and the boy would run. She was so caught up in what everyone was saying about Johannesburg boys and its city. She said Johannesburg was only a city for opportunities, not to find a soulmate because life was too fast, especially for the ones who came from the villages. I understood her, but I was not going to fear that Brian would change me someday or leave me for another person. Would he? He was not perfect for everyone, but he was for me. I mean, he was my man after all, so I didn't need anyone's validation to see that he was perfect for me. He got an opportunity to be a legal intern at Total Energies Marketing South Africa, Pty Ltd, which was based in Johannesburg, CBD. Brian and I started talking about building our own family. He is also a Zulu native, so he understood the procedure of taking a Zulu girl. He had big dreams for our future, his family's future. I don't know what went wrong with him. We were so much in love and nothing would get in between us. That time I was doing my 5th year, working towards getting my master's degree in business psychology. My father introduced me to his business associates who needed some advice and wanted to venture into other businesses, which I gladly accepted because it would help me gain connections and experience. My father had a logistic company that he started after he had bought a farm back at home. He already had livestock that he had inherited from my late grandfather. With his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, it came in handy when he bought a farm and increased the number of his father's livestock. Village people used to buy his cows whenever they were to host ceremonies until this one time when his livestock almost got stolen. He decided to buy the farm, not only for his livestock's safety, but to also expand his business. He started by getting orders from supermarkets around Greytown to deliver fresh fruits and vegetables. His fruits and vegetables demands got high. Then he decided to buy a truck that would transport the goods to retail markets. That was when his business expanded to other cities, later got orders outside the province. I remember all this because he used to take me to the farm and taught me the importance of working hard for your own wealth. My father was my inspirer. I remember when his business was not doing well. His accountant or financial advisor had stolen a lot of money and didn't pay taxes, so the South African Revenue Services, SARS, wanted to shut down his businesses until he had paid the money he owed. My father was so devastated because the guy had gone AWOL. He went through a depression phase because of the pressure he was getting from SARS. I thought I was losing my father that time. He had resorted to alcohol and started shouting at my mother for no reason whenever he was drunk. The sour home situation went on until my uncle, who was a lawyer, helped him with the case and found him a business therapist, who then helped him get over the depressing phase he was going through. A couple of months later, the person who had stolen money from my father was found and got arrested. That was when I got in love with business psychology studies. I wanted to help business people who were going through what my father went through. I saw how my father was when his business was in jeopardy of being closed down and how depressed he was. It didn't only affect him, but it also affected us as the whole family, including the family that stayed in the village. I never wanted to see any business owner struggling or going through something like what my father went through. I didn't want to see businesses being shut down because of selfish and greedy people like that financial manager he had. I was so determined to make my father proud, even if it was the last thing to do. So I studied hard to achieve my goals. 7 years of studying business psychology was no child's play, but it was worth it. I had a very patient and supportive partner. We dated for the full 7 years, but he had paid for my bride price, which is called lobola in our culture. Every cultural procedure, so we were only left with white and traditional wedding. He proposed when I was doing my 5th year, then visited my family to show respect and do what was right. I thought he was my soulmate. I remember when my father asked if I was ready for marriage, I told him that I was ready, but I wanted to graduate first. So the traditional and white wedding had to wait till I got my master's degree. We traveled all the way from Johannesburg to KwaZulu-Natal for the lobola negotiations. My baby had to travel for 6 hours with his family from Johannesburg to Greytown. I was the happiest woman. I got to be with the man of my heart. Guys, you don't know how much I loved my husband. Did I count the chickens before they hatched? I knew he loved me, he showed that to me in every way, and he made me the woman amongst others. At least he made me believe he loved me. I completed my master's degree, and as planned, we started planning for our wedding. He was still working at Total Energies, but not as an intern, but as a permanent legal advisor. Wait. Before I tell you about our wedding plans, on my last year in university and during my exams, I received a call from some lady, name withheld for personal reasons, saying that I should tell my fiancé to be a responsible parent or she would bring their child to live with me since I was the stepmother. I couldn't get angry at my husband for something the woman had said, so I had to ask him first. That time we had bought a small house, enough for us. Well, more like he bought a house because he believed that when a man had paid the bride price to the bride's family, he should have his house where he would stay with his fiancé or wife. In Zulu culture, once the bride price or lobola has been paid to your family, as the bride you are no longer allowed to stay at home but at your house, since it has always been said that the man without his missing rib is no man, just like Adam was lonely without Eve. When he came back from work, I had prepared his favorite meal, which was steamed bread and sugar beans, which was, and still is, a Zulu's traditional dish along with cow's head, also known as inhloko. I even went as far as preparing him bathing water, imagine. So he came back earlier that day. It was like he knew what I had planned. We had our dinner over a small conversation. I didn't want to make him see that I knew about his child. I then randomly asked if he was to hear that I had an affair outside our relationship and got a child, but gave up the child and he found out from someone else. What would he do? Which was something that was not going to happen, or most females with a good mindset would do, no matter what the struggle was. After my question, he looked at me and asked if there was something I wanted to tell him that he didn't know. He kept dodging my question by asking me other questions. Surely he thought I was the one with a secret. If I had gotten pregnant outside our relationship, how would I have hidden the tummy because we had been living together since he went home to pay for my bride price? It's impossible and insane, right? I told him that I had no secrets and I was just trying to make a conversation. He got so angry that night and told me that if he were to find out that I had cheated, he would do something really bad to a point that I would curse the day we met. I was so confused and surprised by his outburst, which meant that he had a secret. I let that slide, not because I was a fool or something, but I was protecting my peace in order to stay focused at least until my exams end. Since that night, he would come back home very late, saying he was busy at work, but I knew that his knockoff time was 16 euro. He avoided me for the whole week. I didn't care less because I was also swamped with exams, so I didn't need his childish behavior to distract me. After I had finished my final exams, he said we should start with wedding preparations because there was no time to waste anymore, since we had wasted more time waiting for me to complete my studies. He wanted us to get married before my graduation, which I declined, and told him that we would start wedding preparations after my graduation, which obviously made him angry and impatient. Was I wrong or selfish to ask him to wait for my graduation before wedding planning? I got confused by the sudden rush, because he even suggested that we should go to court or home affairs and get married there, since I wanted to wait for my graduation before planning a big wedding. I didn't know what was going on with him, but whatever it was, raised some red flags in our relationship. I didn't tell anyone, not even my father, that my fiancé had changed on me. In our culture, it is believed that a woman builds her home and makes sure that she stays. Even if the steel is hot, you have to be patient and bear with your husband or fiancé. I kept everything on my chest, and because I loved him, I agreed to go to court with him just to get a wedding certificate. Mind you, I didn't even tell my parents about that plan, but I believed in my husband, so I agreed. We got married in a community of property. I know what was foolish of me, but it was what I thought was good for me and my husband to have a joint marriage. Few months after our secret wedding, I graduated. I was so happy that I had reached the destination that I had always wanted to reach. I didn't care about finding a job because my goal was to open my own practice in which I would get the help from my father. He introduced me to his business associates and those who had ideas of starting businesses to coach them. It had always been my dream to make my parents proud and see me graduate, especially my father, and I fulfilled that wish. Time passed. My father's connections helped me a lot to get on my feet. My husband and I were on good terms, no more fights or grumpiness. We were the couple that fell in love in university. We were happy again, and I still had kept the girls' call a secret. We started with our wedding planning. He didn't want us to hire a wedding planner, he said. Hiring a wedding planner is a waste of money, and he was not marrying a wedding planner but me, so I am the one who should be hands-on during my wedding preparations with the help of my mother or siblings so that I can get everything I wanted and needed for our wedding to be perfect. I understood that, but my mother went ahead and hired a wedding planner, saying that she didn't give birth to me to suffer. My husband was told that the planner was my distant cousin, because we didn't want him to find out that Mom had hired someone to plan our wedding, while he said he didn't want any planner. My husband was weird and acted like a snob for someone who came from a township. The wedding was planned and the date was set. After a month, we tied the knot in front of our families and friends. My father was so happy, he even shed a tear during his speech. I was the happiest woman alive. I got to spend and celebrate the union of my husband and I. Few months after our wedding, my husband's mother had passed on due to lung cancer, which meant he had to take responsibility for his siblings, even though they had grown old enough to look after themselves. It was really sad. My husband was devastated and pushed everyone away, but I had to be there for him through it all. I had made a vow in front of our family, friends, a priest, and God, so I had to stand by him, whether he was pushing me away or not. After his mother's death, he resorted to alcohol. He changed a lot. From going out early in the morning to coming back late at night. He would come back intoxicated and end up saying hurtful words to me. I thought it was grief, but that went on till I couldn't take it anymore. I got so lonely in the house. Yes, I was working and got busy sometimes, but I missed my husband. I had missed spending weekends with him, but he was nowhere to be found. When I raised the issue, he would tell me that he was the man of the house, and he was not going to tolerate being asked about his whereabouts by a woman. The only duty I had was to be a wife, not a detective. It was emotionally draining having to be patient for someone who had changed on you and made you feel unloved anymore. Sometimes I would visit my parents, but it would only be a day thing, not a sleepover. As much as I wanted to share what was happening in my marriage, I had no one to share my marriage problems with. I started going out on solo dates. The stress and tension was too much. Going out really helped me. I once heard a phrase that says, when a lady is stressed, shopping is the best therapy, which was not true to me because I was not a person who took shopping as therapy. So shopping was not what would make me happy or forget about what was happening in my house. One night I went to this pub and restaurant called the Guildhall Pub and Restaurant to relax my mind. When I arrived, it was packed. And to find out that there was an event happening, it was a great distraction for me and my mind. I needed it, and I felt alive again. I forgot all about my marriage problems and my sudden changed husband. I mean, we didn't even get to our first-year anniversary at least. It was only a few months after we had said our vows, and he changed. He became a stranger at our home. All I wanted was for him to recognize me as his wife and let me into whatever he was going through. I thought it was grief, but no, it wasn't because his siblings would call me and ask if they could speak to him. His phone was unreachable. I had so much fun at the pub and restaurant. I got to hang out with strangers. We drank, danced, and ate. It was a lot of fun. I felt alive and free again. I felt like I was my old self. Not that I was going out and getting drunk, but I was free and happy. I missed being my old self, not a jailed wife. Was I wrong to choose myself for once? So there was this guy, name withheld for safety and personal reasons, who was with the strangers that I had befriended. We clicked, the conversations between us were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had a great time together. Then from there we became close friends. He became my shoulder to cry on. He gave me advice without judging me. My marriage lacked happiness, attention, affection, and time. That guy gave me all that. He made me feel alive and took me back to the times when my husband and I were still getting to know each other. Time went by. The guy and I were pretty close. I considered him my best friend and the brother I have ever had. One weekend, I decided to visit Davidin to see Brian's siblings. I had never seen them ever since the day of their mother's funeral. I felt bad. I had been a horrible sister-in-law, and guilt was eating me up, so I went there to check how they had been holding up. Also to check if I would find my husband there because he had been gone for 3 days without calling. I was worried about him. I asked myself every day where I went wrong or what I did wrong, but I couldn't get any answers. I thought I was the problem. I started doubting myself. I had thought that maybe I was no longer enough for him or I had changed and got ugly. What was I supposed to think? I started having low self-esteem. I was sinking deep into depression. But luckily, I had a friend that I had got from the pub and restaurant. He was everything and more. I told my father about what was going on in my marriage, and the advice I got was, in marriage, you have to be patient for your husband. Just make sure not to make something that would drive him away from your marriage. I didn't understand that kind of advice because it was useless and pathetic. So I had to be patient and bear with the emotionally abusive husband. When I got to Davidin, I found the siblings alone with a toddler. What caught my attention was that the baby looked like my husband, which made me think that maybe it's the baby of that lady who once called me and told me to tell my husband to be a responsible father. I couldn't believe that my husband had deceived me. I stayed with the siblings and asked them when they had last seen their big brother. The elder sibling told me that he had come to see them 3 days ago, and he would be back on the day I went to see the siblings. The bubbly sibling, who they called her Linda, told me that he had left with some aunt. What confused me was that if he had gone with the mother of the child, why would they have left the child with the kids? It just didn't make any sense. Curiosity got the better of me. I found myself asking whose baby they were babysitting, and they confirmed my suspicions by telling me that the child was their brother's, and they had fetched him from his grandmother's house where he stayed. I couldn't believe what my husband had put me through. I mean, the time I tried to make a conversation about having a child outside our relationship, he got angry, of which I couldn't understand. And he even suspected me of cheating while he knew that he was the one who was unfaithful in our marriage. Was I a fool for thinking he had changed before our wedding? Months passed and my husband was back home, but his sudden disappearances didn't stop. I asked him about the child and he told me to mean what I came to his family for, not anything else. Ever since then, I stopped trying. I stopped begging him to treat me as his wife. I tried going back home, but the stupid husband of mine called a family meeting on me. So my parents told me to go back to my house because there was no wife who lives at home, and went back to her parents. By doing that, I would be opening the door for other women to take over my home. God knows how tired I was. I wanted to divorce him, but then I thought about my assets that I had worked hard for. He would get 50% of what I had owned, and besides, my stupid heart still loved and longed for him. I had hope that he would change. I continued going out with my best friend. I was drinking a lot. Then I went to work. My father found out about my changed behavior. He got me help. He was so disappointed in me, and I didn't blame him. One day, I was bored and needed some distraction, so I went to my friend's house. I knew he would make me feel better. I mean, he was my best friend, right? As we were chilling, he started confessing his feelings for me, which shocked me because I took him as my best friend, brother. I couldn't understand his sudden developed feelings. I rejected him and told him that I was married and he was my best friend. I didn't see him in the way he was seeing me. The guy did the unthinkable and blackmailed me to at least sleep with him or become his booty call if I didn't want my husband to find out about the times I had been spending with him and telling him about my marriage problems. I was so surprised by his sudden change. I didn't know what to do because he had been recording all our conversations, which I didn't know about. I had no control over the situation. I didn't want my husband or my father to know about my friendship with this man. So I obliged we kissed, which was the only thing we did, and agreed to be his booty call. But I gave him that promise because I wanted to get out of his house and go to the cops to report his psychic behavior. A couple of months passed, my father got sick, no one knew what was wrong with him, even the doctors couldn't find what was going on. So we ended up seeking traditional help, because in a Zulu culture, it is believed that if someone is sick and the doctors don't find anything wrong with that person, that only means one thing. That person has been bewitched, or someone was bewitching him and making him sick. When my father started getting sick, my husband came back home. He became the supportive and caring husband that I had fallen in love with. He was there for me and my family throughout the whole process of consulting with traditional healers. I asked myself who would want or bewitch my father because he was a kind person. Didn't have enemies, maybe he did, and we didn't know about them. I mean, my father protected himself a lot traditionally because it is believed that a Zulu businessman has to be protected at all times. Few weeks after the traditional healer visit, my father passed on. I was so devastated and broken. Later on, my mother followed. I felt lost, alone, and abandoned. My mother also got sick for a while. The doctors said it was stress or something that related to stress, as she couldn't take the passing of my father. Well, I didn't blame her. I also would have died if I were to lose the husband like my father, and the family members started calling her names, saying that she had bewitched my father to get the inheritance since my father left everything to me and my mother. Most family members were angry and out for blood, so my mother not making it didn't surprise me because it was over her powers. A year later, I had healed but haven't forgotten about my parents. I was more than happy that my husband had been with me during my healing process. He was so patient with me, and he became the Brian I fell in love with. Since my father's business was under my name, I asked my husband to become the business's legal advisor and put him in charge of my father's logistics company, which he did very well with because he had a plan of opening a logistic company branch in another province to grow the business, and the demand was high. So I gave him a go-ahead. There was this other day when he came back with some papers. He told me that they needed my signature. I didn't ask a lot or read them because I trusted my husband, so I signed. not knowing that I was signing my rights to him. A week later, he came back looking angry. He didn't even tell me what had made him angry. He slapped me and called me names. I was so confused and shocked by his outburst until he told me that he knew about my floozy ways with the guy I met at the pub. Since that day, my life became miserable. I was paying for the little misstep I had made. My only sin was trusting a stranger and telling him about my marriage. Worst part, even if I tried to deny it, Brian had proof, which meant that the guy had sent him everything because I got him arrested and he got out within 6 months. I thought he was not going to bother me anymore since it had been a year. I asked Brian how long he knew about the pub guy. He told me in the eyes that he knew way before my father had got sick. What shocked me the most was when he confessed to me that he was the one who killed my father, and he knew that since I was the only child they had, everything was coming to me. I couldn't believe it. All of the acts he pulled, being supportive and loving, was all an act. He even confessed that he once cheated when I was busy being serious with school and he got someone pregnant. I failed to understand how I missed everything. I mean, everything was right under my nose. His behavior kept changing like the weather. Because of my misstep, I paid a great fortune. I lost everything, including my inheritance. I was left with nothing. I regretted and cursed the day I allowed Brian to speak to me. Life changed so much that I found myself going back to Greytown to stay with my mother's family. Was I wrong to fall in love and be bared with Brian's abusive behavior? Please advise me.
Story number 2.
Hey all, this is going to be a lengthy post, so brace yourself. I am a 44-year-old married man. I knew what I wanted in life from the very beginning. A decent paying job, a loving wife, and beautiful kids. That was my plan for life. And I got all of it. Well, almost all until things came crashing down. I caught my wife red-handed cheating with my son's best friend. I am devastated, to say the least. She ruined not just my life, but also my son's. I just wanted somewhere to pour my heart out with my story. I found out that this was a perfect place for people like me to let it out and find comfort from others. Let's back up for a bit till we get to the juicy parts of the story. I know that's what you guys are here for. So let's start from how it all started. My wife, Bella, and I have been married for the past 20 years. We got married when we were very young and just starting on with our lives. Initially, we were very happy, like two love-struck people, and loved every second of being together. Bella had always been a very attractive woman. I might admit that when we started dating, I was always uncomfortable with the way guys used to look at her, always judging as to how a pretty woman like her could be with an average-looking guy like me. And although I was uncomfortable with the way men used to look at her, what concerned me even more was the way she looked back at them, giving them flirty glances and flashing a smile. I guess I should have seen this coming. But when you are young and with an attractive woman, you just want to make that woman your own by marrying her, rather than thinking what could happen to you in the long term. My wife did not have much ambition to work, and I did not mind that. She was a stay-at-home wife that changed very soon. She got pregnant just 2 weeks after we were married. I was elated to hear her being pregnant. On the other hand, my wife did not look that happy. I asked her what the matter was and if she wasn't happy with the news. She said that she is scared and too young to be a mother. I could understand that. I was 24 and she was 21. The fear was understandable. However, I convinced her that I would always be there for her. Finally, after a lot of convincing, Bella finally agreed to go ahead with the pregnancy. Since she was too young and slim, she had a lot of problems during her pregnancy. It was very difficult for me to take care of her and work at the same time. I worked my ass off to keep balance between work and being there for Bella. Every time there was a problem with her pregnancy, she blamed me for forcing her to go ahead with the pregnancy. I ignored it most of the time as I knew that it was just the mood swings and that she did not mean any of it. Finally, she gave birth to a baby boy. We named him Luke. We instantly fell in love with him and wanted to provide him with everything that he ever asked for. We were determined to give Luke the best life possible, showering him with love and ensuring his every need was met. As he grew older, our bond only strengthened, and we cherished every moment spent with our precious son. I started taking up more and more work and got caught up with work most often than not. As he grew older, Bella and I had designated roles in our lives. I was the breadwinner, and she was the caretaker. A few years later, Luke started going to school. Bella would take him to school and get him back. I had started my own business, which kept me busy and away from home. I put all my faith in Bella to raise Luke with utmost care and affection. The days I was home, I noticed that Bella would use ample amount of time to get ready just to drop Luke to school. When I asked her about it, she told me that she does not want other mothers to judge her. She even joined yoga classes to get herself into shape. I was a little surprised by this, but anyway, as long as she was happy, I did not mind it. I had a few dull days at work as business was not doing that well. I was spending much of my time at home. I would get up to see Bella get up early and have everything ready for Luke's school. I could see how she cared so much for him. She would dress up and even put on makeup just to drop him off at 7 a.m. I never knew she was so scared of being judged by others to go through all this effort. I suggested dropping them off as I had nothing going on. She hesitated at first and then agreed. I was waiting by the car with Luke when she rushed in to get her phone. She came in and we drove off to Lukey's school. After dropping him off, I asked her if she wanted to eat out as it's been too long for just the two of us. She said that she has to go to her yoga classes at 11 and can't be late for it. I thought it was strange that she cared much more about the yoga class than spending time with me. I promised her that we would be back by then. I took her to her favorite cafe and we bonded. It was refreshing to spend time alone, just the two of us. At 10, she reminded me that she needs to get home, otherwise she would be late for her class. I told her that I could drop her, but she said that she would like to walk, as it wasn't far off. I did not have a choice, so I stayed at home trying to figure out ways to get my business on track. As days passed, I found a new investor and got super busy. I would often leave home by 5 and get back pretty late. Both Bella and Luke would be fast asleep by the time I was home. I wished and prayed that I get to spend more time with both of them. I did not want to miss this time to see my son growing up. One day I left home very early to meet a potential partner. Halfway there, I got a call that due to bad weather, he could not make it and had to reschedule. I agreed on the reschedule and started heading home. That's when I realized that it was almost time to get Luke from school. I figured I could make it in time and zip through the traffic. I could not imagine the look of surprise on both Luke and Bella when they would see me at school. With these thoughts, I rushed to the school. I parked my car as I started seeing all the kids leaving. I tried to spot Bella and Luke. I decided to look for Bella's car, which would make it easier. I found her car and an empty spot beside it. I parked my car beside her car so I could not miss them when they came out. I was getting impatient when I saw her getting out of one of Luke's teacher's cars. I could not understand what was happening. Where was Luke? Why was she getting out of that car? I walked towards them and confronted her. She looked at me with shock and surprise. I did not know if that was because I was here or because I caught her here. She told me that the teacher wanted to show her Luke's test results and discuss it with her. I asked her that the car is not a place for such an important discussion. I am not a fool. She said that he did not want to turn it into a big issue, so he wanted to meet outside of school. She very well convinced me that it was all about Luke and nothing to do with her. There was nothing going on between them. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and trust her explanation. However, I made it clear that in the future, any important discussions about Luke should take place in a more appropriate setting, such as during a parent-teacher conference at school. We picked up Luke, who was still at school waiting to be picked up, and left. Even though it wasn't much, that experience gave me cause for concern. I did not tell Bella about it, but was not fully convinced about it. As days passed by, I completely forgot about it as I got hit by a truckload of work for my new business venue. As my business started taking off, I decided to ask Bella if we could now focus on building our family. I wanted us to have another kid that would keep Bella company when Luke would be at school. Luke would have a younger sibling to play with. Bella despised that idea. She did not want any more kids. She was happy to have Luke, and that's it. Bella explained that she felt content with their current family dynamic and didn't want to disrupt their lives by adding another child. She emphasized the importance of giving all their attention and resources to Luke, ensuring his happiness and well-being. Despite understanding her perspective, I couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for a larger family and the joy that another child could bring. I put my desires aside for the sake of Bella and her happiness. I did not want to force her again to have another baby when she was not ready. A few days later, I thought that I should take Bella and Lukey out for a trip. I had not completely mended things with Bella. I was hoping to do that during this trip. I reached home early and could not find her. It then came to me that she might be in her yoga classes. As it was nearby, I decided to walk and give her a surprise. It was strange that there was no one around for the class. There were no cars or even people walking by. I approached the door and was just about to knock on the door when I heard my wife laughing. I stopped in my tracks and ducked quickly. I hid behind a tree as I saw Bella walking out. I could see her yoga instructor put his hands on her thighs. I was enraged and came out of hiding. As soon as he saw me, he pulled his hand away. Bella was unfazed, as if there was nothing wrong. I pulled her from there, and as we started walking, I told her what I saw. She told me that he is used to it as he has to teach by touching and correcting the postures. Also, she mentioned that he was gay. I was not convinced, but I let it go. Like I said, my wife and I had been married for 20 years. It was not a happy marriage, for the most part of it at least. After we had a baby, I started working my ass off to provide for her and the baby with everything they needed. It was hard. I had to make ends meet and also be available for Bella and Luke when they needed me, which was almost every day. In spite of this, Bella always complained about me not being around when she needed me. It was getting difficult for me to explain to her that I needed to work extra hours at my job so that we could raise our baby the way we wanted. The strain on our relationship only intensified after Luke started going to school. I felt torn between being a caring husband, a doting father, and the sole bread-earner of the house. Somehow, I still managed to maintain the financial stability for our young family. Despite all this, she always blamed me for convincing her to have a baby and ruining her future. This was the topic of constant arguments between us for a long time. The tension between us only grew more and more, as she believed that her dreams and aspirations were shattered because of my decision. It seemed like in every disagreement, we had to circle back to this topic, causing strain in our relationship. And although we had cracks in our relationship, and we were never going to be the same again, we both loved our son too much, so we stayed together for his sake. There were instances when I had noticed my wife flirting with young men, which according to her was not harmful at all. She called it being friendly and told me I was jealous. I ignored this as I always believed she would never cheat on me. I decided I will not ask her anything about her male friends as long as she took care of our son. Looking back now, I don't think that was a good thing. I even caught her a little too comfortable with a few men more than once. I let it go as I loved her way too much. Our son Luke has always been a very good boy. He was very good at his studies and always responsible. He grew up with another boy named Troy. They were inseparable since childhood. When they were 12, Troy's family had to move to a different city for his dad's business. The boys still kept in touch even after that. They would often video chat and plan visits to see each other during school breaks. Despite the distance, their friendship remained strong, proving that true bonds can withstand any obstacle. When Luke and Troy were 15, they decided to go to the same university. They had rented an apartment there and were living together. One summer, Luke and Troy wanted to come and stay with us during their summer. We were very happy to hear this. After the boys arrived, our house was filled with laughter and joy after a long time. Seeing the boys around the house brought back memories of when we were all younger and spent summers together. I was hoping that this could be an opportunity for us to get closer to each other as a family. Bella was the happiest to have the boys around. She insisted on driving them everywhere and was spending as much time as possible with them. I was happy to see that due to Luke and Troy coming over. There was so much positivity in our house, and subsequently, less friction between Bella and me. I thought that this could be an opportunity I could grab to mend my relationship with Bella. I went out of my way to plan a trip to a cottage in the woods with the boys and Bella. I was very excited for this trip that could change a lot of things for me. I carefully arranged all the details, from organizing fun activities for everyone to ensuring a comfortable stay at the cottage. The anticipation of spending quality time together in such a peaceful setting filled me with hope and optimism for the future of our relationship. The activities would keep the boys busy and give me some alone time to reconcile with Bella. I did not share my details of the trip as I wanted it to be a surprise for all of them and look at what I would see when they realized where we were heading to. I told all of them that I would be taking them on a long drive and we might be back early in the morning, so we packed up a few clothes. Bella was very reluctant but went ahead with the plan. We started driving and the boys started playing loud music as the car sped off. After 3 hours of driving and a few bathroom breaks, we were on the road to the cottage. That is when realization stuck and the boys looked at me amazed. They finally understood what I had planned. We made our way into the cottage and made ourselves comfortable. The boys made plans of what they would do the next day. Everything was going the way I had wanted it to. We had our dinner and went to bed. The next morning, we headed out skiing and were out till lunch. During lunch, I noticed that Bella was eyeing Troy with a mischievous smile. I could not shake that feeling off, but then I felt very absurd to think that Bella would think something of Troy. He was a kid who had grown up in front of our eyes. I decided that I was thinking way too much into it. Troy is the same as Luke to her. It can't be. I ignored my gut and tried focusing on improving the relationship between me and Bella. After the kids left, I told Bella that we should spend some quality time together. I could see that spark in her eyes when we used to be close. I cursed myself for doubting her. We had a nice romantic afternoon away from all the noise and hustle. I finally thought that things will slowly start getting better between us. I promised her that I would try to take such trips often so that we could slowly get back to the way we were. As we were heading back home after 2 days of our trip, I had a smile pasted on my lips thinking of how this has changed my life. We came back and things were slowly going back to normal. Bella would kiss me goodbye when I left for work. This was something that had not happened in like a lifetime. I was really happy and went to work with a smile on my face after a long time. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, knowing that our relationship was back on track. Bella's affectionate gestures brought a renewed sense of hope and optimism for our future together. Things were getting better and she was actually trying to rebond with me. But my happiness did not last too long. I started noticing that my wife had been missing from our bed almost every night for a couple of nights. Bella is usually a very sound sleeper and rarely wakes up in the middle of the night. I had been having a very bad feeling about this. One day when I woke up in the middle of the night to get some water, I noticed she was not there beside me on the bed. I thought she was in the bathroom, but she wasn't. I slowly walked downstairs to check if she was in the kitchen getting something to eat or drink. I couldn't hear any noise, but nevertheless, I went and checked in the kitchen. It was all dark and silent. As I started walking back upstairs, I noticed that the door leading to the backyard from the kitchen was open. I was sure that I had locked it at night to avoid any animals getting into the kitchen. I opened the door to make sure that there were no animals and was about to lock it when I heard a noise. I decided to investigate this. I followed the noise and thought it might be a bird or something. I decided to wait for a few minutes to see if it fades away, but it did not, and it kept on coming. As I walked closer to where the sound was coming from, I realized that it was not the sound of a bird. It sounded more like a human's voice. It sounded like someone was moaning. I thought it was one of the boys fooling around with a girl they must have picked up at the club earlier. As I approached the sound of the moaning, my heart sank as I recognized the voice. It had been so long since I had heard this voice, but it was unmistakably Bella's. But who was she with? Was she cheating on me with someone? Who could it be? As all these thoughts raced through my mind, I slowly approached the door to our barn, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly opened the door, revealing a scene that shattered my world into a million pieces. There she was, locked in an intimate embrace with someone I had never imagined. It was Troy. I could not believe what I was seeing. I was looking at my wife and the best friend of my son in the same bed, naked, making passionate love. How could they have done this to me? And Troy? He was Luke's best friend throughout his life. Luke would be devastated if he comes to know about this. I was full of rage. I switched on the lights and shouted at the top of my voice, "What the fuck is going on over here?" Bella was shocked to see me, and Troy was terrified and started apologizing. I asked him to get out of my house immediately. We had a big confrontation with a lot of shouting and yelling at each other. I saw a side of my wife that I had never seen before. She looked at me with so much hatred. Hearing all the commotion, Luke ran up to the barn and saw everything. He was equally shocked and hurt. Looking at her son, seeing her like that, Bella for the first time realized what she had done. And although she was embarrassed, she hated me to have insulted her this way in front of her son. She despised every bit of me. It felt like the only reason she had been putting up with me for so long was for the comfort I provided along with the company of my son. In that moment, all the love and affection seemed to have vanished, replaced by anger and resentment. It was as if our relationship had been built on such a fragile foundation that it had finally crumbled under the weight of our differences. I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to salvage what was left of our marriage. I don't even know if I want to get back together after such a deceit. Troy did not have any face to show us. He packed his bags and left. On the other hand, Bella, my dear wife who had been married to me for the past 20 years, was waiting for me in our bedroom. I didn't even want to look at her face. She had become the most disgusting human being to me in that instant. As I entered the bedroom, the tension between us was palpable. The once loving and familiar features of her face now seemed foreign and repulsive, a painful reminder of the shattered trust and betrayal that had consumed our relationship. I was in no mood to talk to her. She said that it was all my fault. I was taken aback by her accusation. Not only was she the one who cheated, but now I was the one to blame. Wow, just wow. What was I even expecting from her? She started her rant that if she would not have had a baby at such a young age, then her wife would have turned out to be completely different. It was I who had forced her to have a baby, and that changed everything for her. She lost her freedom, figure, and youth all at once. She would have probably become an actress or a model that would have changed everything for her. I was left speechless after all the venom she was spouting out. I had nothing to say to her after listening to all this. I was at least expecting my wife to love Luke with all her heart, but I was so wrong. All she felt was trapped and suffocated, so I asked her to leave. I was setting her free. The next morning when I woke up, there was no sign of Bella. I couldn't care less for that woman. I felt betrayed and hurt by the woman I had done so much for. I couldn't help but imagine all the times she had flirted with all those young men and wondered if she had been sleeping around behind my back for a long time now. I wondered how long this had been going on for. All those times when she had told me that she was just being friendly and I shouldn't feel jealous. I felt like a complete loser and hated her so much. I felt disgusted by what she had done to me and Luke. I was in a state of shock for the first few days. I couldn't fathom what had happened. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt this had been going on for a while. I imagined how many men she must have slept with. All those days when I was working my ass off to make sure that I could provide everything that my family wanted. She was cheating on me and having the best time of her life. I felt disgusted to even think of the number of men who had slept in our bed with her. Luke had completely shut himself in his room for almost a week. Even now, he rarely comes out of his room, mostly to get food and water. He hasn't spoken a word since the incident. I'm really worried about him. I'm not sure if I should take him to therapy to help him deal with the situation. He not only has to deal with his mom cheating, but also the fact that she was cheating with his best friend. That could lead to a lot of stress for a teenager. It has been a difficult time for me as well. I finally decided to divorce my wife. I did not want her to ruin my son's life anymore. It would be better if she stays away from the both of us. She anyway felt suffocated with us around. It would just be me and Lukey now. I still do not know how to react to all of this. Someone I had loved and been with for 20 years, someone I had shared the roof with for 20 years, was suddenly not there. I felt lonely and angry at the same time. But then I realized why I felt so much anger. It was not entirely because my wife had been cheating on me. It was also because she did not have the decency to apologize to me for her behavior, for what she had done to me, to us, to Luke. Not once did she come and say that she was sorry and she regretted it. I knew I could not live with myself if I did not teach her a lesson for what she had done. At first, I thought I would start seeing other women to make her jealous and make her realize what she lost. But then I realized it won't matter to her as she never loved me. I am not a violent person and do not wish harm to anyone, but I wish she was dead. But as much as I wished that, I knew that was not going to happen unless I did something about it. So I started devising ways of how I could hurt her. And although I did not like this, and how this anger was consuming me, I knew I couldn't just move on with life without doing something. After all that which happened, I realized that I cannot let this go. I cannot let Bella ruin my life and leave Luke in this state and be happy. So I hired a private investigator to spy on her to see what she was doing with her life. I wanted to know what kind of life she would be living with us out of her way. She had taken up a job as a receptionist at a 5-star hotel and was meeting a lot of people. After about a couple of weeks of spying, I was given pictures of her flirting with a rich old man. There were several pictures of her latching onto this man like a despo. I just couldn't help but think, did I never mean anything to her? We were together for 20 years and she moved on in just a couple of weeks. Did I or Luke mean nothing to her? All those years together, all those things that we had done as a family, meant nothing to her? I can't just sit and do nothing. I couldn't let her get away with it. Luke had gone away for university to another city, as he did not want to run into Troy. I was alone at home and tried to formulate a plan to teach her a lesson. I called her and asked her to meet me after the weekend, and although she was hesitant, I told her I wanted to discuss something about the divorce. She agreed, so I asked her to come home after work. I had prepared dinner and was waiting for her when she arrived around 11 p.m. We sat down and I asked her if she was hungry. She said she was not, and asked me what I wanted to discuss. Clearly, she was in no mood to stay and wanted to leave as soon as possible. I gave her a drink which I had spiked. Within minutes, she was unconscious and I carried her to the basement. I gagged her mouth and tied her hands and feet to the bed. She woke up after some time and was shocked to see what had happened. She started struggling with the ropes. She tried screaming but couldn't. She realized what was going on and was completely terrified. I gave her an injection and she passed out again. I had installed cameras in the basement to record everything that was going to happen in this room. I hired a male escort who would help me with my revenge. I had transformed our basement into a motel room with dim lights so that she cannot make out where she actually is. After my wife woke up, things had been completely different and she felt like she was in a different place. The male escort acted as if she was always there with him. He told her a facky story about how they met at a bar and then ended up in this motel room. The escort started undressing her and she was enjoying it. She was completely in her senses now. She did not hesitate even a little to get comfy. He was young and willing to have sex with her, and that was all she wanted. As I was looking at the recording sitting in my room, I felt more and more disgusted towards her. Is this what her real face is? All she needs is a man to fulfill her sexual desires? I paid the escort and asked him to leave. Till the time it took my wife to wake up, I got the footage from the previous night and sent it to all her lovers that my private investigator has provided me with. I also sent it to her parents and the hotel she was working for. I wanted to ruin her even more. When she finally woke up, she was tied to the bed again and I was sitting across her, sipping my morning coffee. It took a while for Bella to understand where she was and what was happening. She started yelling what I was doing in her room. I turned on the lights to show her where she was. She was stunned to know that she wasn't dreaming. She was actually here last night. I took her to the living room, her hands still tied and her face taped. I made her sit and watch the footage from last night. As the footage played, I told her if she ever thought about me or Luke while having fun last night. There were tears in her eyes, but I knew better not to fall for them anymore. I had learned from past experiences that her tears were often a manipulative tactic designed to evoke sympathy and divert attention from her own actions. Despite the sadness in her eyes, I remained resolute in my decision to no longer be deceived by her deceitful ways. I told her what I wanted to tell her, spoke my heart out about all the instances I felt that she had lied and cheated me. This time she took it too far as she hurt not only me, but also Luke. Luke was her son as well. I asked her if she did not think how it would impact Luke when he would come to know about her and Troy. Did he not matter to her at all? Had she never loved him? I could do nothing about it now. I knew that nothing I say or do is going to change, that all our lives have been ruined by my wife's actions. I untied her, asked her to dress up so that I could drop her off to wherever she wanted to be dropped. With a heavy heart, I left my wife at the hotel she was working for and left with the closure I wanted. So, here we are. I am unsure if what I had done was right or wrong. The hurt and the indifference of my wife towards me and my son broke my heart. I would have somehow held on to myself, but Luke, he was a baby. He did not have to deal with all of this. It was not his fault. Why did she have to do this to him? Even after living for 20 years with a person, you cannot be sure if you know them well. I am still clueless about the reasons my wife stayed with me after all that hatred deep down. I am here to share my story and see if there is some advice or guidance I can get from you guys regarding the best course of action going forward. Comments. 1. You Reddit user 1. OP, I am aware of what you are going through. However, I feel that what you have done as revenge was way too extreme. You should just let go of this hatred you have towards your wife and move on. You still have your son who loves you and cherishes you. I believe that you both should move on and stay as away from your wife as possible. Continuing to hold on to this intense hatred will only bring more pain and negativity into your life. It's important to focus on healing and finding happiness for yourself and your son. Surround yourself with positive influences, seek therapy or counseling if needed, and channel your energy towards rebuilding a fulfilling life without dwelling on the past. Remember, forgiveness and personal growth are powerful tools for moving forward. 2. You Reddit user 2. OP, I am shocked at what your wife has done. I am too scared to trust anyone after hearing your story. I can't even begin to imagine the pain and betrayal you must be feeling right now. It's heartbreaking to think that someone you loved and trusted could do something so devastating. I think you did the right thing by sharing your story and seeking support. It takes immense courage to confront such a painful situation and open up about it. I think that you needed this closure and she deserved this type of punishment. A woman who does not care about a man she was married to for over 20 years is a shame. She did not even care about her son. I can't believe that she never tried to reach out to her son after all this. 3U Reddit user 3. Imho, she never really cared about you, the marriage, or your son. She always did what she wanted. There had been so many red flags and so many instances that you let go without getting into details of it. You would have saved a few years of your life and also the embarrassment to your son. He would have at least had his best friend with him if you had left her a long time back. I hope you learn from your mistakes and move on.